Welcome to Twilight Fables, where we tell stories for you to sleep, if you can. You've heard this one before, haven't you? A gentle rhyme, a lullaby, a nursery chant, passed down through generations. Pat a cake, baker's man. It danced from your lips as a child, clapped between tiny hands, full of laughter and love. But what if it was never just a game? What if the rhyme was a ritual? What if the baker wasn't a kindly figure, but something older, something hungrier, and the act of marking it with a B meant binding something deeper than dough? Tonight, we pull back the veil on the rhyme you thought you knew. Tonight, we uncover the story hidden in flour and fire. So dim the lights, close your eyes and listen, if you dare. The house on Hemlock Street had been closed for years. It sat tucked behind a crooked line of sugar maples that leaned forward like gossiping old women, their branches clawing toward the windows. Ivy crept up the stone foundation like veins on pale skin, and the paint, once a cheerful buttercream, had blistered and peeled away, revealing a skeleton of grey beneath. Most of the locals had forgotten it was there, or at least they tried to, but the old bakery had never stopped breathing. It exhaled faintly through the rusted chimney in winter, puffing stale warmth, even though no fire had been lit in years. The scent of something sweet and heavy lingered on the wind whenever storms rolled in, a scent no one could quite place. Some said nutmeg, others said blood. For a long time, the building simply waited until the Beck family arrived. They came in late October, their U-Haul rattling down the leaf-choked driveway as twilight settled over the town of Ashbrook Hollow, a quiet town, the kind of place where people still left casseroles on porches and closed early on Sundays. But under its charm was something older, something still baking, just beneath the crust. Eleanor Beck noticed it first. She was the kind of mother who paid attention. She noticed how the townsfolk paused when they heard where she'd bought property, how they exchanged glances when she said her daughter had taken a liking to the empty bakery floor. Strange place, one woman at the farmer's market had muttered while tying up her bundle of rhubarb. Always smelled like cake, even when it was closed. Eleanor had smiled politely, but deep down she remembered the way her daughter, Lily, had immediately wandered toward the back of the house when they arrived, past the parlour, past the dusty parlour piano and the broken grandfather clock, into the long-forgotten kitchen. The oven had still been warm. At first, it was charming, the idea of restoring an old bakery. Eleanor had always dreamed of making her own sourdough, of waking up early and rolling out dough, while her husband, David, brewed coffee and Lily sketched at the breakfast table. The idea had shimmered like something from a vintage cookbook, but things rarely taste the way they look in pictures. The first night, Lily began singing in her sleep. It was a low, murmuring sound that drifted down the hallway and through the vents. Eleanor thought she was imagining it until David nudged her awake and whispered, "Do you hear that? Pat a cake, baker's man." The melody was slow, too slow, drawn out like something trying to remember the words. "Bake me a cake as fast as you can. Ask it tonight." When Eleanor pushed open her daughter's door, Lily sat upright in bed, eyes closed, hands moving in the soft rhythm of the rhyme, clapping softly to an invisible partner. Eleanor stood frozen. The old house creaked around her. Somewhere deep inside the walls, something ticked. "Mark it with a B," Lily whispered, and then she smiled. The next morning, she didn't remember anything. Children do strange things. Sleepwalk, make up stories. Eleanor told herself that. Told David too, though his expression tightened in a way she hadn't seen before. But as the days passed, it became harder to explain. On the fourth night, Eleanor found flower footprints across the floor leading from the kitchen to Lily's room. Small, barefoot tracks, like someone had walked from the pantry to her daughter's bed, except none of them had baked anything, and the flower bin was still sealed shut. Then came the laughter, soft, unmistakably childish, coming from inside the kitchen walls. Eleanor tore them open herself. By the second week, she had stopped sleeping. She would sit in the hallway, watching Lily's door. Sometimes the girl would talk in her sleep. Sometimes she'd whisper, "Don't forget the marking. That's how she knows who to take." And then came the drawings. Crayon illustrations started to show up in Lily's sketchbook. At first, they were innocent enough. A girl in an apron, a kitchen, a birthday cake. Then the cakes had faces. Then they were screaming. Eleanor burned the book. Lily didn't even notice. She was changing, quieter, pale, her fingers twitching in that slow clapping rhythm. Even when she watched cartoons, her laughter grew distant, as though someone else was laughing through her throat. It was then that Eleanor asked the librarian about the house. Old Mrs. Crowthorne gave her a long look, then reached for a brittle folder from the local history section. Inside were newspaper clippings, faded photographs, and one handwritten letter signed only, "A Friend." The clippings told a grim tale. The bakery had changed hands many times, each new owner vanishing within the year. The townsfolk would wait a respectable period, then reopen it under a new name. Sweet Ash, Batter and Bloom, the Hearth, each more cheerful than the last. But always it returned. There were whispers of strange rites, of a baker who could call up spirits with the right chant, children who went missing on their birthdays, and cakes found still warm on windowsills after funerals. The letter was shorter, scrawled in a slanted hand. "Don't let her sing the whole rhyme. If she finishes it, she becomes the baker." Eleanor left the library shaking. She came home to find the oven on. Lily sat in front of it, hands red with food colouring. Or was it something else? A small, doll-sized cake sat cooling on the open door. It was shaped like a little boy, and its eyes, they were raisins, but the raisins were wet. Eleanor screamed. David took Lily out of the house that night, drove her to a hotel. Eleanor stayed behind. Someone had to understand what was happening. Someone had to stop it. She sat at the kitchen table, the old one with the burn marks in the corner. She listened to the house, and the house began to hum. A low, vibrating chant started in the pipes. It echoed through the ducts. The words were familiar. Pat a cake, pat a cake. Something was baking again. Not bread, not cake. Something older, something that wanted out. The wind whispered through the brittle autumn leaves outside Eleanor's new home, brushing them across the cracked sidewalk like dry, dragging fingers. Inside, the house remained hushed, heavy, with the kind of silence that settles into places long forgotten. Eleanor stood in the hallway, blinking up at the narrow staircase. The hand-carved banister, once rich and warm, was now dulled by time and neglect. The whole house felt like it had been paused mid-breath. Her daughter, Lily, had been quiet that morning, too quiet. Since they'd moved in, Eleanor had chalked up Lily's odd behaviour to stress. It wasn't easy, she knew, moving from the bustle of the city to this sleepy corner of New England. But lately, Lily's gaze lingered too long on empty corners. Her footsteps came when no one else was walking, and the singing, soft, garbled, with words half-formed like old nursery rhymes left to rot, had started 2 nights ago. Pat a cake, pat a cake. It wasn't the tune that unsettled Eleanor. It was how slowly Lily sang it, as though dragging each syllable through molasses, as though someone else were teaching her the words from memory. But the memory had gone sour. That morning, she found the girl sitting cross-legged in the upstairs hallway, a circle of flour on the floor before her. "Lily," Eleanor called gently. Lily didn't answer. Her small hands were patting the flour softly, deliberately, like dough being pressed flat by invisible palms. Eleanor crouched, her gut tightening. "Where did you get the flour?" "From the cupboard," Lily said. She wanted to play. Eleanor stared at her. "She?" Lily blinked, innocent and blank. "The lady in the kitchen." "There's no lady, sweetheart." Lily turned away and resumed patting the flour, humming again. "Pat a cake, pat a cake, baker's man." Eleanor stood, her breath shallow, and stepped away without pushing further. But the unease had taken root. That phrase, "the lady in the kitchen," rolled around in her head long after she had cleaned up the mess and taken Lily out for the day. That night, Eleanor lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The house creaked and sighed. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing over the windows with a low howl. She was beginning to hate the quiet. She missed the hum of traffic, the light pollution, the distractions. Down the hallway, she heard soft singing again. "Market with a B." She sat up. No baby books, no cartoons, no videos had taught Lily that line. Not that version. Eleanor knew the old rhyme. but only the cheerful, abbreviated versions modern kids heard, not the one with "mark it with a B" whispered like a final promise. Eleanor pulled on her robe and crept down the hallway. Lily's door was open, the moonlight falling across her small form in bed. Her eyes were shut, but her lips moved. "Put it in the oven for baby and me." Eleanor's heart stumbled. "Lily?" Lily's eyes popped open. She sat upright, stiff as a board, and smiled wide, too wide. "It's her favourite part." Eleanor's throat closed. Whose favourite part? But Lily lay back down and closed her eyes, the smile still ghosting her lips. The next day, Eleanor found herself in the town library. The building was ancient, a relic of cobbled stone and moss-slicked steps. She hadn't meant to go in, but something compelled her, something more than curiosity. It felt like gravity. The town's history section was nestled in a dim alcove at the back, bound in the musty scent of damp pages and dust. Eleanor traced her fingers along the worn spines until one name stood out: Margaret Bakewell. The local paper's yellowed clipping had no photo, but the headline was enough: "Housewife found dead in fire. Arson suspected." Eleanor froze. The address listed in the article was her house. She kept reading. The article explained how Margaret Bakewell, a young woman in her early 30s, had been known for her kindness and for baking sweet treats for neighbourhood children. But strange rumours followed her. Children had been heard speaking in odd rhymes around her home, and some even claimed she played games with them at night through the kitchen window. One neighbour swore she saw Margaret baking something small in her old cast-iron oven, though no evidence was ever found. The fire that killed her had no clear cause. Some believed it was deliberate, that Margaret herself had lit it in madness. Others whispered the opposite, that something had come to collect her. The report was dated October 12th, 1951, the same day Eleanor and Lily moved in. That evening, as Eleanor prepared dinner, she caught Lily staring at the oven. Her hands were folded behind her back. "Lily!" Eleanor's voice trembled. Lily blinked slowly. "The lady said she used to bake for all the children." Eleanor dropped the knife. "She told me a rhyme, Mummy," Lily whispered. "She said, you have to say it slow, or it doesn't work right." The little girl raised her hands and began to clap softly. "Pat a cake, pat a cake." Eleanor turned off the stove and backed away. "Where is she, Lily?" she asked, barely managing to keep her voice even. Lily pointed to the oven. "She's waiting." Eleanor couldn't sleep. The house seemed to stretch with each hour, groaning with age, sighing with breathless memories. She lay in bed, sheets clutched in her hands, listening to the ticking of the old hallway clock. Each second passed like a metronome for her fear, reminding her she hadn't imagined it, any of it. The whispering, the rhyme, the oven, and her daughter's voice, calm, innocent, certain. She's waiting. She had locked the oven door that night. Ridiculous as it seemed, she'd knelt down and clicked the child lock into place, half expecting to hear laughter behind her as she did. But the house had been silent, save for the occasional creak or moan from the beams. Still, Eleanor hadn't been able to shake the feeling she was being watched. Not just watched, measured, like someone was deciding if she would make a good ingredient. That night, she dreamed of burnt cookies. They lay on a tray, blackened and crumbling, but each one bore a strange shape. Tiny faces, mouths open in a scream, eyes melted away. The tray was still hot, glowing at the edges, and a hand, long-fingered, flour-caked, and red from heat, held it out to her. "Pat them," a voice whispered. "Mark them, bake them." She woke, choking on the smell of smoke. In the morning, Eleanor called the local real estate office. A young woman named Joni answered, chipper and practiced. "I just need to ask a question," Eleanor said, trying to sound casual. "The woman who lived in this house before us, was there someone here recently?" Joni hesitated. "Oh, well, no, not since the 60s, I think. That place stayed empty a long time. No one ever made it more than a month or two." Eleanor's stomach dropped. "Why?" The pause that followed was not casual. "Well, people said it was just bad luck. Leaks, rodents, electrical problems. But one family claimed there were sounds, that their kids started singing all these old rhymes in the middle of the night. Creepy stuff. I think they said something about the oven too. Isn't that funny?" Joni laughed awkwardly. "Yeah," Eleanor whispered. "Funny." Later that day, Eleanor took Lily for a walk to the town square, hoping sunlight and fresh air would cut through the gloom that had seeped into her bones. The square was quaint, cobblestoned, with an old fountain in the centre and a circle of wooden benches. A plaque near the fountain caught her attention. "Dedicated to the children lost in the neat 51 Baker Street fire. Gone, but not forgotten." Her blood went cold. Baker Street, her address. She moved closer. 5 names were etched into the stone. All children. The youngest had been 4. "Mummy," Lily said beside her. "That's where she watched them from." Eleanor looked down. She said she used to sit right over there. Lily pointed to a now empty bench. She said she loved to see their little hands clapping, but they weren't supposed to stop. If they stopped, she got hungry. "Lily," Eleanor said slowly, "who told you that?" But Lily had already skipped ahead, humming again. Her voice floated back across the square. "Pat a cake, baker's man." That night, Eleanor didn't sleep. She sat in the kitchen instead, a cup of tea forgotten beside her, eyes locked on the oven. It made no sound. It didn't twitch, but something about it felt wrong, as if it took up more space than it physically should, as if it was deeper than the wall allowed, a doorway instead of an appliance. The silence stretched so long it became loud, and then a faint rattle. The oven lock trembled, not enough to open, just a subtle metallic ting. Eleanor stood, her hand hovered over the counter near the rolling pin. Something ancient inside her screamed, "Don't go near it," but she couldn't look away. A slow shadow was forming in the glass window of the oven door. It looked like a hand, pressed palm first against the inside. The fingers twitched. Eleanor backed away, knocking her cup to the floor. It shattered, the porcelain echoing across the tile like bone. The hand vanished. The next day, Eleanor went back to the library. She needed more. This time, she found a different section, local folklore. At first, the books were all about festivals and quilting bees, but one thin booklet near the bottom had no author and no spine title. Inside, someone had written in red ink, "Patter Cake Origins, Margaret B." The contents were chilling. According to the notes, patter cake wasn't always a game. In some old European traditions, it had been a kind of ritual. Children were taught the rhyme as a way to appease something, a spirit, perhaps, or a figure that watched from ovens, hearths, or fireplaces. Some believed the rhyme was used to mark children, that if they clapped the hands in time and marked with a B, they were offering themselves or another. It was supposed to distract the spirit, keep it satisfied. The baking metaphor was symbolic at first, but in older villages, disappearances often followed. The last page had a crude drawing, a woman in an apron, mouth wide open, towering behind a circle of children. In her hands, a rolling pin and a baker's paddle. The ink below was smeared, but Eleanor could just make out the words, "Never stop clapping, never miss a beat, or she'll mark you for the oven." That evening, Eleanor found flour again. This time, not from Lily, but in the shape of footprints. They began near the pantry, crossed the linoleum floor, and stopped directly in front of the oven. The door handle bore smears, like someone with flour-dusted hands had grasped it. Eleanor stared, her body cold. She turned to Lily, who was colouring quietly on the floor. "Did you play in the flour again?" Lily didn't look up. "No, she was baking." "Who?" Lily's crayon moved in a circle. She said, "I'll be ready soon." Eleanor didn't bother sleeping that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, with the hall light on and her bedroom door open, watching the shadows sway against the wood grain walls like living things. Every now and then she'd hear a tap, too soft to place, but rhythmic. Not the furnace, not the pipes. It sounded like clapping. The next morning, Eleanor made a decision. She packed a bag for Lily, called her sister 2 towns over, and insisted, begged, for her to take Lily for a few days. She didn't care how it sounded. She couldn't let her daughter be in that house one more night. Her sister reluctantly agreed, and Lily, ever docile, didn't protest. But before she left, as Eleanor knelt down to zip her backpack, Lily said something in a whisper. She doesn't like when you interrupt the baking. Eleanor froze. Who, Lily? Lily glanced toward the kitchen. The baker lady. She said you're a bad helper. She says it'll burn again if you don't mark it right. Eleanor's hands trembled on the zipper. She says, next time, no more warnings. That night, Eleanor returned to the house alone. It felt heavier, not just empty, angry. She walked the halls, turned on every light, opened every cabinet. She opened the oven. It was cold, normal, clean, but the air smelled faintly of burnt sugar and iron. That was when she heard it again, from upstairs, a low, rolling whisper, pat it and prick it and mark it with B. The voice wasn't Lily's. It wasn't even trying to sound human. It had a rasp, like burned parchment rubbing against old bone. Eleanor grabbed her phone and ran up the stairs, following the sound. It led her to the guest bedroom, the one she never used. Inside, the furniture was covered in dust cloths, but the bed was turned down, sheets folded with care, pillows plumped, as if someone had just made it, and at the foot of the bed, on a silver tray, sat a plate of cookies, blackened, misshapen. They steamed softly, as if fresh from the oven. Eleanor turned and fled. She drove for hours, circling the town, until the sun began to rise, and exhaustion anchored her back toward home. Maybe she would break the lease. Maybe she'd burn the place down. Maybe she'd check herself in somewhere. But she couldn't ignore it any longer. Something ancient lived in that kitchen, and it wanted a child. When Eleanor returned, her house was quiet again. She stepped inside slowly, keys clenched in her hand like a blade. The kitchen lights were off. The flour had been cleaned. The oven sat innocent and blank. But something felt off, different. She checked her phone. No messages, no missed calls. And then she saw it. On the fridge, a drawing, one she didn't recognise. A child's crayon sketch, Lily's style. It showed a tall figure with a round head and square body, like a cake, but the mouth was jagged and red, and the hands were huge, stretched out like paddles. Surrounding it were smaller figures with X's for eyes. At the top, in pink marker, Lily had written, B is for bake. Eleanor couldn't breathe. She grabbed her car keys again, ready to leave, to never come back. Bang! She spun. The oven door had slammed shut. No one was near it. She took a step closer. The air was warmer. The glass window glowed orange. The oven was on, but she hadn't touched it. And the inside, movement. She dropped to her knees, looked through the glass, and saw a face, small, pale, eyes wide in terror, a child. The face screamed soundlessly, mouth open against the glass, then vanished into smoke. Eleanor fell back, crawling, hyperventilating. The oven door creaked open. Steam billowed out, and a single word whispered from inside. Helper. That night, she stayed at a motel. She didn't dream. She didn't sleep. She watched the ceiling fans spin until the sun returned and lit the room gold. Then she went back to the library. The librarian didn't seem surprised to see her. "I figured you'd be back," the woman said. She was older, grey-haired, with kind eyes that had seen too much. "People always come back when it's the baker." "The what?" The woman leaned closer. "You're in the Baker Street house, aren't you?" Eleanor nodded. "She chooses that one every few decades, long enough for people to forget, but the children never do. They remember. The town remembers." "What is she?" Eleanor asked. "What does she want?" "She was real once," the librarian said. "In the 1800s, a midwife, a baker, a healer, they thought, until kids started going missing. She always had sweets for them, baked for the poor, but after the fire, they say she didn't die. Not really, just baked herself in." The librarian pushed a brittle book across the counter. Inside, a story, a poem, an old rhyme not unlike patter cake, but longer. "Bake them softly, bake them slow, mark them well before they go. Flour their hands, then clap and wait. Turn the oven, seal their fate. Beneath it, a note in faded pencil. Keep the clapping, don't stop, don't let her choose." Back home, Eleanor felt the house breathe again. It didn't groan this time. It shuddered like something was eager. She stepped into the kitchen. The oven was off, but flour was already spread across the counter. A small handprint had been left in it. Lily's. The clapping started again. Faint, distant, from inside the walls. And the voice returned. "Mark it with B, and put it in the oven for baby and me." Eleanor didn't step into the kitchen. Not at first. She stood just past the threshold, heart hammering, eyes locked on the counter where the flour lay like fresh snow. There were more than just Lily's prints now. Tiny handprints, too many. They weren't all the same size. Some were smaller, some were smeared, as if the hands had dragged away, screaming. "Don't let her choose," the note had said. But she already had. Eleanor backed away, then turned and sprinted upstairs. She threw open Lily's closet, her drawers, the toy chest, gathering everything her daughter had touched. Her favourite blanket, her stuffed turtle, the hand-drawn pictures from preschool. She dumped it all into the bathtub and soaked it in salt water. Every folk tale she'd ever heard said salt protected, cleansed. Then she grabbed her old Bible, one that hadn't seen light in years, and thumbed through trembling fingers until she found something, anything, that spoke of fire, of purging. But no verse could help her now. Downstairs, the oven dinged. She crept down again, slow as snowfall. The kitchen lights flickered overhead. The room was thick with heat, and the sickly sweet smell of burnt sugar and something else, something rancid, like cooked meat, long forgotten. The oven door was wide open. On a tray, blackened cookies spelled out the word again, and underneath it, in crude strokes, was a shape that looked like a child, arms raised, head hollowed out. Eleanor's knees nearly buckled. She clung to the doorframe, trying to steady herself, trying to remember the rhyme, not the modern version, but the one from the old book. Flour their hands, Then clap and wait, clap and wait. Was that the ritual? A protection? A ward? Or a summoning? She couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until she understood. Not until she could undo whatever she had allowed in. The next day, Eleanor drove 2 towns over, back to her sister's place. Lily was quiet, but cheerful. Too cheerful. She'd drawn a picture she wanted to show her mum. A round oven with 2 stick figures inside, and a tall shadow standing outside it, watching, clapping. Her sister noticed Eleanor's reaction and pulled her aside. "She talks to someone at night," she said, whispering. "In her sleep. Sometimes she's clapping. I thought it was just a game." "It's not." Eleanor packed Lily's things. "I'm taking her. I'll figure it out." That night, back at the Baker Street house, Eleanor set up a barrier around Lily's room. Salt, flour, iron keys, whatever she could find in folklore. Lily didn't complain. She seemed distant, like she wasn't fully there. "Do you remember the baker lady?" Eleanor asked gently as she tucked her in. Lily nodded. "Has she said anything to you?" "She said I was almost ready," Lily whispered. "She said you ruined the first batch, but I'm her favourite now." Eleanor fought the scream rising in her throat. Midnight came. The house moaned. Lily stirred in her bed, clapping softly in her sleep. 1, 2, 1, 2, over and over. Eleanor sat at the foot of the bed, watching, waiting, praying. The lights flickered once, twice, then died, and from the hallway, the oven light turned on. No one had touched it. The warmth spread again, thick and unnatural. The scent of burning returned, stronger than ever, and the voice, closer now. "Pat it, and prick it, and mark it with B." Eleanor stood. She walked to the door, and as she looked down the hallway toward the kitchen, she saw the outline of a figure in the dark. Not a person, a thing, tall and round, like a woman made of scorched dough. Her eyes glowed coal red. Her mouth was a jagged crack that split upward into the shape of a grin, filled with teeth made of burnt sugar and bone. She was clapping, slowly, deliberately, and every time her hands came together, the house seemed to flinch. Eleanor stepped forward. The thing didn't move. It just clapped. "You can't have her," Eleanor said, voice shaking. "She's not yours." The thing tilted its head. Its grin widened. "She's marked." "Then mark me instead." The clapping stopped. The kitchen fell silent. Then a dry, crackling whisper. "You're too old, too bitter, no sweetness left." Eleanor's blood chilled. "She's mine," the voice hissed. The sugar baker's voice, suddenly razor sharp. "She claps better. She remembers the rhyme." The oven creaked open again, and in its flickering glow, Eleanor saw faces in the heat. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all small, all childlike, all clapping in silent unison. Eleanor had one chance. She remembered what the rhyme said, what the librarian told her. Don't let her choose. Keep clapping. She turned and sprinted back to Lily's room. Lily sat up in bed, eyes wide but blank. She was clapping, faster now, harder, almost violently. Eleanor grabbed her daughter's hands. "Lily, stop! Don't clap!" Lily looked at her, dazed. "She said, if I stop, I'll burn." "No," Eleanor whispered, holding her close. "You don't have to. Not ever again." She picked Lily up, ran for the door, and didn't look back. They didn't return. They never would. Eleanor moved to a different state, under a different name. But every now and then, Lily would wake in the night, hands twitching. Sometimes, Eleanor would catch her mouthing words in her sleep. Pat a cake, baker's man. And once, on the bathroom mirror, drawn in steam, she saw the letter B. 3 months had passed. Eleanor had hoped time and distance would dissolve the strange sickness that clung to Lily. They moved into a one-story rental, surrounded by cornfields and empty roads, far from Baker Street and its haunted stove. But evil, Eleanor had learned, didn't need a kitchen to bake in. It only needed a door. At first, Lily seemed fine. Better, even. She made a friend at her new preschool, a quiet boy named Sam, who also liked to draw monsters and shadows. One day, Eleanor picked her up early and found them sitting under a tree, clapping. Not like a game, more like a ritual, slow, in sync, as if keeping time with something ancient. Sam's lips moved. Eleanor strained to hear. "Roll it, and pat it, and mark it with..." Eleanor's breath caught. "Lily!" she called, her voice sharp. Both children stopped clapping. Sam looked at her with wide, pale eyes. "Why did you stop us?" he asked. She was almost here. That night, Eleanor dug deeper. She searched through obscure forums, digital archives, threads long abandoned. She found references, whispers, other parents, other children, all connected by the same song. Each case was different, a different version of the rhyme, a different baked good, even different apparitions, but always the same outcome, disappearance, or worse. One forum post chilled her blood. If your child has begun clapping in their sleep, you're already too late. The baker comes through laughter first, then rhythm, then fire. Break the chain before the mark is complete, or she'll bake again. Another said, "Don't just leave the house. Bury the tools, destroy the oven, clean the name, or she'll follow the flour trail back to you." Eleanor threw out all flour in the house. She scrubbed every counter, every crumb, with vinegar and salt. She burned the old cookie sheets. She even replaced the oven. And still, Lily clapped in her sleep. Only now she muttered words, fragments of forgotten verse. "Tick it with tallow, break it with bone." They weren't lines from Pat a Cake, not any version Eleanor had ever seen. Then the whispers started. At first, they came through the vents, soft like wind, then through the drains. Late at night, when Eleanor passed the laundry room, she'd hear it, clap, clap, then silence. One night, she turned the corner and saw a trail of flour leading from the pantry to the bathroom. No one had spilled any. No flour had even been bought. Eleanor followed it anyway. At the end of the trail, the bathroom mirror bore a smudged print, a child's hand, burnt at the edges. Eleanor sought help. She brought in a local priest, but he recoiled when she mentioned the rhyme. "Don't speak it aloud," he warned. "That's how she binds. That's how the oven door opens." A spiritualist told her to make noise, constant noise. Clapping draws her, silence feeds her. So Eleanor kept the radio on. She filled the house with white noise, television static, even old music boxes. But silence crept in like mould, and on the 6th night, every sound in the house stopped at once. The clock paused. The refrigerator went quiet. The only noise left was clapping from Lily's room. Eleanor ran. She burst through the door. Lily sat on her bed, back arched, eyes wide and glassy. Her hands moved on their own, like marionettes. In front of her, standing in the corner, was the thing, not fully visible, just the silhouette, tall, flour-dusted, with cracking joints and smoke seeping from between its seams. Its mouth opened, and instead of a voice, it made the sound of a preheated oven. "She's nearly done," it hissed. "Golden brown." Eleanor lunged. She broke the salt line. She yanked Lily into her arms and ran. They didn't stop running until dawn. Eleanor drove aimlessly. Country roads, gas stations, diners where old men sipped coffee and looked like they'd seen worse. At one diner, a woman approached. "Cute kid," she said. "She claps, just like my niece did, back before." The woman paused. Her smile faded. "Before what?" Eleanor didn't ask. She knew. That night, Eleanor didn't sleep. Lily curled on a motel bed, humming the rhyme softly, breath catching on unfamiliar words. And when Eleanor closed her eyes, she dreamed of ovens, of a room filled with flowery air, of rows of children baking in pans, like gingerbread men, rising and splitting and screaming in silence. And always, always the clapping, endless and steady. The next morning, Eleanor drove to her childhood home. She hadn't been back in years, but something about the kitchen there, the old stove, the window facing the orchard, felt safe. Her mother had baked from scratch, the kind of baking passed down from women who used chants instead of timers. Maybe that's what this was. Not a demon, but an old god, a forgotten spirit, a hunger passed through generations. She needed to go back to the beginning. The house was smaller than Eleanor remembered. Weeds choked the garden. The shutters hung crooked, but the kitchen still breathed. It smelled of cinnamon, dust, and memories. Lily walked through the doorway like she'd been there before. Her little feet left faint white prints on the wood floor. Flour again. Eleanor stood in the doorway, staring at the old stove. Cast iron, heavy, the kind that whispered when it heated up. This was where her mother had taught her the rhyme. Patter cake, baker's man. She used to think it was about love, about mothers and children, Warm biscuits on rainy afternoons. Now she wondered what her mother had really meant when she said, "Say it right, the right way protects you." Eleanor opened the bottom drawer, pulling out her mother's recipe book. The spine cracked, pages yellowed with time. She flipped through until she found it. Patter cake, old style. Beneath the title, scribbled in her mother's fading handwriting, "Never mark it without naming who it's for. Never skip the roll, never miss the clap, and never, never let her finish the verse." Lily sat at the old wooden table, fingers twitching. Her lips moved silently. Eleanor sat beside her. She took Lily's hands and began to clap, slow, gentle. Patter cake, patter cake. She watched Lily's eyes. They blinked slowly, like waking from a trance. Baker's man. A breeze swept through the room, though no window was open. The oven groaned. "Bake me a cake as fast as you can." The stove's pilot light flared. Eleanor's hands faltered. Lily's face went slack. Her head tilted. Something spoke through her. "Mark it with C and put it in the oven." Eleanor slapped her own hands together, breaking the rhythm. "No," she said. "We stop there. That's where it ends." Smoke curled up from the stove, black and sweet. The kitchen filled with the scent of burning sugar. Then silence, and Lily blinked, just once, then twice, and she whispered, "Mummy." The days that followed felt like walking across thin ice. Eleanor didn't let Lily near music. No clapping, no humming. She played soft jazz in the background, day and night. She even burned rosemary in the corners of the house, the way her mother used to, when the air felt thick. And it seemed to help. Lily drew again, smiled, asked for pancakes, but something still lingered beneath. One morning, Eleanor found a message on the steamed-up bathroom mirror. 4 words, "Mark it with C." She drove to the last place she knew might help. An old friend of her mother's, Miriam. A woman Eleanor remembered only through the haze of spice and riddles. Miriam lived alone in a moss-covered cottage near the river. She opened the door before Eleanor even knocked. "You waited too long," Miriam said. "I didn't know," Eleanor whispered. "You did. You just forgot. That rhyme isn't a game. It's a contract. A summoning, a binding." Eleanor nodded. "Can I stop it?" Miriam's eyes narrowed. "You can't stop it, but you might be able to contain it." Inside, Miriam lit candles, beeswax and bloodroot. She placed a bowl of salt on the table and instructed Eleanor to put her hands in. "Now repeat the rhyme," she said. "But this time, break it, twist it. Words are doorways. You need to confuse the thing watching." Eleanor began. "Patter cake, patter cake." She hesitated, then continued. "Miller's ghost. Boil me a loaf and burn it the most. Scratch it with salt and circle it twice. Wrap it in whispers, not sugar and spice." The bowl of salt turned black, the candles flickered, and from the hallway, Lily laughed. A sound too deep for a child's throat. The room shook, glass shattered in the windows, flour blew from nowhere, coating the walls in dusty handprints, and in the smoke, the baker appeared, not fully formed, just a suggestion, a smouldering apron, a face made of scorched dough and bone. It stepped forward, but Miriam shouted, slamming her hand on the salt bowl. The salt hissed, and the figure recoiled. Lily's laughter broke. She cried out. Eleanor ran to her, shielding her with her body. The air grew still, then silence. The smoke dissipated. The flour handprints faded. The baker was gone, for now. Miriam looked at Eleanor with tired eyes. She'll try again, she warned. Not here, maybe not now, but she always tries again. Then what do I do? Eleanor asked. You raise your daughter with silence, and with new songs. Never let her hear the old rhyme again. And if she does? Eleanor asked. Miriam sighed. Then teach her how to burn it, instead of bake it. The first few weeks after the summoning were quiet, almost too quiet. Eleanor moved them to a different town, small, wooded, quiet. She chose a house without a gas oven. She played rain sounds at night and forbade nursery rhymes. No clapping games, no schoolyard chants. Lily adjusted, mostly. She smiled less, she slept more. Sometimes Eleanor found her in the kitchen at dawn, sitting on the floor, tracing circles in spilled cereal. Still, it was peaceful, until the dreams returned. They started small. Lily would whimper in her sleep, whisper fragments of the rhyme. Eleanor would shake her gently, hush her back into silence. But then the drawings came back, crayon scribbles of black ovens, of a figure with no face, just a mouth, wide and cracked, filled with teeth like broken sugar cubes. Lily called it the taster. He waits for me, she told Eleanor one morning over breakfast. He wants me to finish the rhyme. If I do, he'll bake me a cake. Eleanor nearly dropped her mug. Sweetheart, she said, struggling to stay calm. You can't ever finish the rhyme. Not ever. But he's hungry, Lily whispered, and he said I'm the recipe. Eleanor reached out to Miriam again. The call didn't go through. She drove to the cottage, only to find it cold and abandoned, door ajar, salt still scattered along the windowsill. No sign of Miriam, just the faint scent of burnt gingerbread. She left a candle on the stoop and returned home. That night, Lily's fever spiked. Eleanor heard her muttering from her room. Mark it with C and put it in the oven for... Eleanor burst in, clapping her hands hard. Wake up! Lily gasped, blinking. Her hands were crusted with flour. The bedroom floor was dusted with cinnamon. It was growing stronger. Lily wasn't just remembering the rhyme. She was reliving it. The lines had started appearing on the walls in her handwriting, etched in what looked like ash. And Eleanor began to hear it too, at the edge of her dreams. A low voice, humming, pat a cake, a voice old and cracked, like something trapped behind an oven door for too many years. She knew she needed help, but there was no one left to ask. So she did what her mother would have done. She made a charm using salt, twine, and an old rolling pin. Eleanor built a binding circle. She placed it in Lily's room and told her daughter, "If he comes again, stay inside the circle. Clap 3 times, but don't finish the rhyme. Understand?" Lily nodded solemnly. That night, Eleanor stayed awake in a chair by the bedroom door. At 2:13 a.m., the air grew heavy. The curtains moved, though the window was shut. The scent of burning sugar filled the room, and Eleanor heard it, the soft patter of invisible hands clapping in rhythm. Then Lily's voice, "Patter cake, bakers, clap!" Eleanor shouted. 1, 2, 3. The lights flickered, and he appeared. He didn't come from the oven this time. He crawled from underneath Lily's bed, too large, too long, dragging a sack that smelled like scorched flesh. The taster, his mouth opened wider than his head, cracked like dried clay. He reached toward Lily, but the circle held. His hands smoked when they touched the edge. Still, he grinned. "You can't keep her forever," he said. "The rhyme is hers now. You passed it down." "She didn't finish it," Eleanor said. "Not yet," the taster crooned. "But she wants to. I've sweetened the promise." And then he vanished, sucked backward like smoke into a chimney. In the morning, the charm was blackened. The flower from under Lily's bed was gone. But something had changed in Lily. She was quieter, hungrier, and when Eleanor made breakfast, Lily reached for the sugar and whispered, "He said I'd taste like cinnamon." Lily didn't return to school, not after what Eleanor saw that morning. She'd walked into the kitchen to find her daughter standing on the counter, staring into the empty microwave as if it were a portal, humming a soft melody, a lullaby that didn't belong in the waking world. The microwave was cold, but the air around Lily shimmered with heat. When Eleanor called her name, Lily turned slowly, her eyes unfocused, and her lips moved. But the voice that came out wasn't hers. "Roll it, and pat it, and mark it with pain." Eleanor grabbed her daughter down and held her tightly. Lily sobbed into her shoulder. "He's in my dreams, Mama," she whispered. "He puts things in the oven and makes me watch them rise." "What kinds of things?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling. "Me," Lily said. "Sometimes me, sometimes other kids, sometimes you." That night, Eleanor tried to fight sleep. She made coffee, sat upright in bed, but eventually her eyes drifted closed, and in the dream she stood in a kitchen made of shadows. The cupboards moaned, the sink dripped blood, and the oven door was open, and something inside was moving. She stepped closer. On the blackened baking sheet was a human heart, rising like bread. Steam curled from its seams. The smell, sweet and meaty, turned her stomach, and behind her a voice breathed, "Bake me a cake, as fast as you can." She turned. The taster was there, only now he wore a butcher's apron and his fingers were pastry cutters. Eleanor backed away, but he only smiled, licking his cracked lips. "She's nearly done," he said. "You've preheated her well. She's a child." "She's a recipe, Eleanor. The old ways demand ingredients, and you fed her the rhyme. I didn't know. You sang it to her in the womb. You clapped her hands to it. You bound her with it." He stepped closer. All you had to do was stay quiet. Eleanor woke screaming. The walls of her bedroom smelled like cinnamon, and on her nightstand sat a single cupcake, still warm. She didn't touch it. The next day, Lily wouldn't eat, wouldn't speak, only stared at the window, occasionally tapping her fingers in a slow clap. Eleanor took her to a child therapist. The woman smiled politely, took notes, nodded a lot, but that night the therapist called in a panic. "She drew something during our session," the woman whispered. "I thought it was just a scribble until I looked closer." "What did she draw?" Eleanor asked. "An oven, and me, inside." That night, Eleanor found a new message on Lily's wall. This time, not in her handwriting. It was burned into the plaster. "You can't unbake the bread." She knew the answer wouldn't be found in science or therapy. She had to return to the old ways. She called in favours, searched dark corners of the internet. Eventually, she found a woman in the next state over, someone who had once undone a rhyme curse. Eleanor packed a bag and drove through the night, Lily asleep in the back seat. But halfway through the drive, she glanced in the mirror and realised the thing in the back seat was not her daughter. It wore Lily's face, her hair, her clothes, but it wasn't her. Its eyes didn't blink. Its smile was too wide, and it was humming again. Eleanor gripped the wheel, heart thundering. "You're not Lily," she said. The thing smiled. "I'm the batter. You're the oven." She slammed the brakes and the car skidded into a dark field. She jumped out, yanked the back door open. The seat was empty, just a pile of flour and a smear of frosting. Panicked, she called out, screaming Lily's name. Only silence answered. And then a faint giggle from the nearby tree line. She ran. Branches whipped her face. The moon glowed too bright, like a spotlight over a stage. In a clearing, she found a tiny oven, old, rusted, sitting in the grass like it had always been there. Smoke curled from its chimney, and a single note was pinned to the handle with a sugar-dipped nail. It read, "You're the last ingredient." Eleanor dropped the note. It floated gently down, landing like a final petal from a poisoned flower. She didn't want to open the oven. She knew what would be inside, and yet her hand reached forward, trembling, drawn not by curiosity, but by something deeper, a compulsion, like muscle memory passed through bloodlines. The handle was warm, too warm. When she pulled it open, heat rolled out, thick and sweet. Inside lay a small cake pan, rising gently. The batter inside pulsed. It had veins, it had eyes, and it looked at her. She staggered back, her vision blurred. The oven groaned, metal warping, reshaping. It wasn't just a kitchen tool, it was a cradle, a womb, a ritual. The ground beneath her feet rippled like dough being kneaded. Behind her, the trees whispered, voices chanting, soft and sticky. Bake me a cake as fast as you can. Bake me a cake as fast as you can. Over and over, she turned, and the taster stood there. He had no face now, just a swirl of icing in the shape of a grin. His chest was a bakery display, organs arranged like pastries, glazed and labelled. You've almost finished it, he said sweetly. The recipe is perfect. One last stir. You'll never have her, Eleanor growled, stepping between him and the oven. She's already in, Eleanor. She's been rising since the first time you sang her the rhyme. She's not a cake. Oh, he said, sighing. But she is. All children are. The old ones taught us that. You just forgot. Lightning split the sky. Eleanor lunged forward, slamming the oven door shut, then turning and shoving it over. It rolled across the clearing and hissed like it was alive, angry. But the chanting stopped. The trees fell silent. The wind died. And then a wail from the darkness, a scream that turned into a child's voice. Mama! She spun, heartbreaking. Lily stood at the edge of the woods, barefoot and crying. Eleanor ran to her, wrapped her arms around her. She felt real, solid. And when she looked back, the oven was gone. They returned home, but things were not the same. Lily no longer hummed the rhyme. She no longer touched the oven. Eleanor poured concrete into it anyway, just to be sure. Weeks passed, then months. The air lightened, the shadows retreated. One day, Eleanor took Lily to a birthday party. It was a sunny afternoon. Balloons, streamers, happy parents. She let out a breath she'd been holding for too long. Maybe it was truly over. And then, from across the yard, she heard it, a chant, a group of children in a circle, clapping to a familiar beat. Pat a cake, baker's man. Eleanor's blood froze. She looked toward Lily, who wasn't in the party anymore. She was standing in the kitchen, pressing her hands against the oven door, only it was already warm. The rhyme had never needed a singer, only an audience, and the taster, she realised, had never left. He had only risen. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Eleanor didn't scream. She couldn't. Her voice was trapped somewhere beneath the weight of dread, pressing against her lungs. Lily stood still, hand resting on the oven. Her eyes were unfocused, like she was listening to something inside her head. Lily, Eleanor whispered, trying to steady herself. Step away from it. The child's fingers twitched. Then her head turned, slowly, deliberately, and she looked over her shoulder. There was a smile on her lips, but it wasn't Lily's. Would you like to try a piece, Mommy? The voice was high, musical, but off, as if played backward. Behind Lily, The oven clicked. The door slowly opened, revealing not fire, but a staircase descending into darkness, carved from brick and bone. The scent of cinnamon and rot filled the room. "No," Eleanor said, stepping forward, hands out. "You're not her. You're not my daughter." "Then what am I?" the thing in Lily's body asked. The voice wasn't asking, it was inviting. "You're a recipe someone never finished," Eleanor growled, reaching into the drawer beside her. She didn't know what she'd find. Salt, flour, prayer, but her fingers closed around a rolling pin. Old, wooden, carved with symbols she hadn't noticed before. She gripped it like a weapon. The thing in Lily laughed, but not like a child. It laughed like ovens, crackling in old houses, like wood splitting, like brittle teeth. "You can't stop tradition," it said. "You baked her into it." "No," Eleanor whispered. "I'll burn it out." She swung the rolling pin. It hit Lily's shoulder, not hard, just enough to break the contact with the oven. The child screamed, but it was Lily's scream this time. The smile cracked. The oven flared. Eleanor grabbed her daughter, pulling her away. The room twisted, air thickening like batter, rising, choking. The staircase inside the oven groaned, creatures beginning to climb. She reached for the handle and slammed the door shut. The world snapped back. The kitchen was still again. Lily sobbed in her arms. "What happened? Why am I crying?" "You're okay," Eleanor whispered. "It's over." But they both knew that was a lie. That night, Eleanor buried the oven in the backyard. She poured salt in the earth. She etched the wood of her house with protective signs, half remembered from childhood, and she never sang another nursery rhyme again. Years later, Lily would ask, "Why don't we bake cookies, Mom?" Eleanor would smile tightly, then shake her head, because sometimes, she'd say, the wrong recipe calls you back, but the rhyme, it always finds another kitchen, another mother, another child to need, because traditions don't die, they just rise again.